Good Yom Kippur, everyone. Elie Wiesel asked a question that he answered. The question he asked is this: why did God create human beings? And he answered, because God loves stories. Every person you meet is a story. When I was growing up and attended an Orthodox day school in Massachusetts and in Ohio, there's this expression some of you may have heard, Tzom Kal, may you have an easy fast. I've never understood that because the whole idea is it's not supposed to be easy. So I prefer saying, may it be a meaningful fast. And in thinking through, how can we make this day meaningful? There's no better way than to hear the stories of people you may know. I love these three. This is my introduction of all three. I'm not going to give it because Baylee Less, Wendy Rotter, and Alex Saharovich, their lives, their stories, their passions are better than any food we'd be eating right now. We're going to go in that order as each speaks, and then there'll be time afterwards. Hopefully, their words will resonate with you here, and I know thousands of you watching out there. But I just want to say, for those of you watching, somebody here came up to me and said, "It's so nice to see you not in a little box." So, any of you out there, we're here live. Without further ado, let's hear it uninterruptedly for Baylee Less, Wendy Rotter, and Alex Saharovich.
Hi, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Good. Okay. My dad told me he was going to do the wave when I came up, but I didn't see it happen. So there we go. There we go. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad. My name is Baylee Less. I was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised at this temple, this synagogue, and I was really honored when Rabbi Greenstein asked me to speak today. He actually emailed us extremely specific instructions of what to do. I did not follow them, so I apologize. He was like, write it down, get ready for it. He even told us like the suggested page number. I started writing and it just felt too formal because, we're not very formal here. We are all friends, we're all family. I know really the majority of people sitting in this room. So thank you for coming today. So I made some notes. Also, I'm talking about my life and I felt like I knew my life pretty well, so I didn't need to write it down. But we'll get into it. So I consider myself really lucky because I consider myself both a Jew by birth and a Jew by choice. I was raised in an interfaith household. My father is Jewish and my mom, of blessed memory, was Christian. So I got to experience a whole world of religion that I think a lot of children don't necessarily always get. We celebrated Christmas, we celebrated Hanukkah, we celebrated Passover, Easter, and a lot of them, were kind of close together, and a lot of the traditions overlap, but a lot of them were different. I went to a Presbyterian day school growing up, and then I went to Temple Sunday School on Sundays. So I just got this whole, worldview of what religion can offer and what community can offer from two really different points of view. So I like to call myself, Christian and Jewish growing up. I really felt drawn towards both of them. And then when I was in 5th grade, my mother passed away. And that was really scary, really hard for me, hard for our whole family. And after she passed away, I became scared to death of death, literally. For any 5th grader, for anyone, death is really terrifying, and I wanted to find a way to understand it and figure out, where did my mom go? What happened? What is going on? What happens after this wonderful life that we all get to live, as Rabbi Dreyfus was talking about earlier? And so I started looking towards religion again. And I looked at Christianity, I looked at Judaism, I looked at Buddhism, Taoism, atheism. I looked everywhere that I could for what different religions said about the afterlife. And when I got to Judaism, and we were talking about it, and I was having discussions with, different rabbis, most of them were saying that it really isn't a discussion at all. Judaism's answer to the afterlife is that we focus on the here and the now, and we live in the present, and we focus on this world that we're currently in, and what's happening to us every day, instead of thinking about what comes after, and instead of dwelling on that. And I really loved that answer because it really reminded me of my mom, which was really beautiful to me. She always lived in the present and was always focused on the people around her and what was going on at that moment, and celebrating the joy, and also, wrestling with sadness and with hardness. And so that was really what kind of pulled me more towards my Jewish roots, towards this community and this synagogue. When I got to high school, I joined BBYO, which was definitely one of the best decisions of my life. I made all of my good friends that I still have today in high school through BBYO. I learned so much more about Judaism and just, what it has to say about the world and about a lot of the questions that we have as humans and as people living on this earth. And then I went to college, and all of a sudden I was a Jewish studies major. So I went from a Presbyterian day school to a Jewish studies major. So that was a crazy path. And I just continued learning and continued studying, continued making friends, continued meeting community members, and I just completely fell in love with the Jewish community and with Judaism at its core. And now I work for Memphis Jewish Home. So, so there we go. I absolutely love working for the home as well. I think that taking care of seniors is definitely, a tenet of Judaism that I hold really dear. And I think there's nothing more fulfilling than working with seniors and people, who really need us. And so one thing that Rabbi Greenstein asked us to do was kind of think about the different Jewish values that guide our lives. And so I kind of landed on 3. The first one is definitely that Judaism always encourages us to live in the present and to just be here and now. And one of the things that made me really fall in love with that and realize that Judaism loves beauty. Like, we are such a religion who, when something happens, we have a blessing for it. And I brought my Siddur today because one time when I was looking through it, I got kind of to the back of the Siddur, and there's this entire list of blessings for all of these things that are kind of almost everyday things, but we decided that we needed a blessing for it because it is that beautiful and it's that important. And just some of the examples are, upon smelling fragrant fruit, upon seeing the ocean, hearing thunder, seeing a rainbow, there's just lists and lists of them. And when I saw that, I was just like, that is what we need to be thankful for every day is, the things that are in our everyday and that are so beautiful and meaningful as well. So definitely one value that I live my life by is always trying to be in the present and finding beauty in every moment. I also am such a book lover, and as Rabbi Dreyfus said, we are the people of the book. So learning and study came really easily to me. I'm a writer by trade, and so, finding a community that was obsessed with reading as I was really, just a dream come true. So I absolutely love the values of Judaism that encourage us to always ask the questions that we need to, the hard questions, and we also typically accept all 8 answers that are given. It's never yes or no. And I just think that's great. And, my brother as well, some of y'all may know him, Josh Less, he also just loves Judaism so much. And we can't have a family dinner without him, we say he's going rabbi. And just, he just asks the question. And one question one time was, is there a difference between a pastime and a hobby? And we literally spent 45 minutes discussing that. And no one would ever ask that question. And, I think that we just love just asking the questions that no one does and just kind of investigating things that are really important to everyone. And finally, the last value that I always try to live by, and the real reason I always come back to Judaism and to this, the synagogue, is community. Judaism, you're supposed to pray in a group with other people. When someone dies, you're supposed to be with the people that you love and the people, that knew the person who passed. And that is one thing that I think is so beautiful, is that it's not a religion of, aloneness. It's a religion of togetherness. And I love being around people. I'm definitely an extrovert. Anyone that knows me well, I draw energy from other people. And I think that's what's so beautiful about Judaism, and definitely the number one reason I always come back again and again. So I know most of the faces in this room. Thank y'all so much for coming and listening to me. But I'm going to pass it off to Wendy now.
I will say one thing from the introduction I didn't read. I said, Mikom lamdai hiskalti, which means much have I learned from my teachers, more from my peers, but the most from my students. And Baylee, I've known since before 5th grade or around then. And what she didn't say was she worked here. She was the first Connect TI 20s and 30s person before Youth Villages took her away. And it took me 5 years to forgive her. So on Yom Kippur, I just want to say I forgive you for leaving. And when I say the most I've learned from my students, I studied Judaism with Wendy, and even Alex will speak after her, who chaired our adult learning. And you know how it is when you're with just really smart, deep people? You're in a position of being the teacher, but you learn more from them. Wendy, and then Alex.
Thank you, and good Yontif, everyone. Baylee, thank you for sharing your story. It was intimidating being asked to join two people I admire so much, Baylee and Alex, here today on Yom Kippur to share my Jewish journey. I would rather recite 100 biblical Jewish names than talk about myself. I'm so fascinated by stories, by the stories of all of you here, by Baylee's, by Alex's, but to the extent that sharing my story is interesting or helpful to any of you, it's my honor. I don't talk about my journey very often. I live it. My Jewish story is here, and it's here, and it's here with all of you, my temple family. If I shared the photo album of people, places, and experiences that inform who I am as a Jew today, the pictures don't come into focus until I'm a young adult, but as a Jew by choice, I see foundational images in my childhood. I grew up in a loving family on a small farm outside Columbia, Tennessee. I think the only Jewish family was the Kustoff family, our local ENT. My parents had a falling out with organized religion, but were still very deeply committed to instilling the values of taking care of community, welcoming the stranger, and sharing a portion of our acre. I'm grateful for their early modeling of these values, still so important to me today. From a religious standpoint, we were twice a year Episcopalians. Out of my experiences, however, I grew to understand that Christianity was just not a fit. I could not reconcile the concept of the Trinity. But I did need a relationship with God and a framework for prayer and a faith community to live out my values. So I set out on a search earnestly in college. There were important signs and influential people along the way. The first of whom was Abe Plow, the benefactor of my scholarship to Rhodes. I had the honor of having lunch meetings with Mr. Plow in the years before he passed away because he took an interest in his students who benefited from the scholarship that he had endowed in memory of his parents whose portrait hangs in the sanctuary lobby here at Temple. I'll always be grateful that Abe Plow made my college experience possible, as Rhodes put me on a trajectory to learn to look at the world and myself in new ways. Rabbi James Wax was my second sign. How fortunate I was to learn at the feet of this giant, who in his retirement as Temple's senior rabbi was on the faculty of Rhodes. I spent a wonderful semester exploring Judaism with Rabbi Wax and my college classmates. We loved him. He was one of the most popular professors. I get goosebumps today having a fuller understanding of his impact and leadership in the civil rights movement, and invite you all to walk upstairs today, and then I promise you'll have to go multiple times to learn more about his legacy and all that he accomplished and his impact in our Adler Museum upstairs. So by 1890, okay, wait a minute. Okay, by 1985, I'd say my spiritual journey had begun. But on a fateful evening in December of 1992, I accepted that blind date with Carrie Rotter. He was a twice-a-year Jew from Baron Hirsch. We fell in love, and I saw the rest of my life begin to unfold. What I loved most was his intellectual curiosity and ability to talk about deep subjects, including my spiritual journey. As we contemplated marriage, Carrie did not require that I convert, but asked only for my commitment to raise a Jewish family. Based on my extensive reading at that point and experiences with Carrie and his family, the commitment to raise Jewish children was easy. Carrie, I will always be grateful for the time and space you gave me to make the second most important decision of my life, choosing Judaism for myself. So we married in December of '93. We were married by Rabbi Martin Henshin of blessed memory. In our counseling sessions with Rabbi Henshin, I could not have felt more accepted and confident in my choice, and I'll always treasure that he gave me my Hebrew name for our ketubah, Shoshana, meaning rose. So shortly thereafter, we joined Temple, began to attend services, made friends, and attended a class, Raising Jewish Children, taught by Rabbi Greenstein shortly before the birth of our daughter, Rachel. It was actually at Rachel's naming ceremony, conducted by Micah, that I resolved that it was my turn, and I decided to embark on the study of Judaism. When I made the decision to formally convert, I asked Rabbi Greenstein if he would accept me as a student. After months of reading and discussion with Rabbi and lots of self-introspection, my conversion ceremony was held at Temple on the 16th day of Nisan and included a very chilly trip to the natural water mikveh at the lake of Burton Artwolf on their farm in Eads. Thank you. It was worth it. It was worth the trip. That was 5760, 23 years ago. It's passed in the blink of an eye, and yet it feels like a lifetime. Thank you, Rabbi Greenstein, for believing in me and making it possible for me to choose Judaism, the greatest gift of my life. I still love learning with you. Early on, a few friends asked me why in the world I would convert. This is a difficult life. And my answer was simple: it's who I am. I chose Judaism out of love. Judaism gave me all that I was searching for and more. It's a framework for living, learning, loving, praying, raising my family, and serving my community. So what do I value most about Temple Israel? So many of you sit in this room, but first I'd have to say raising my family. Carrie and I could not be more grateful for the foundation and love that Temple poured into our children as they grew up. We are so proud of the Jewish adults that Rachel, age 26, who's with us today, and Jacob, who's streaming from Washington, D.C., have become. The friends and mentors I've made here have become extended family and give my life so much meaning as we learn and play and serve our community together. We're so blessed to have the spiritual inspiration of our rabbis and music. You speak to my soul. Temple has offered me so many opportunities to continue to learn and grow as a Jew and a person. Learning Hebrew and taking classes with fellow members ultimately led me to become a bat mitzvah and read from the Torah with my adult friends. Truly an awesome experience for all of us. Our family fell in love with Israel on a family trip led by Rabbi Greenstein, and we forged many wonderful friendships with the other families on that trip. And I encourage, if you've not been to Israel and or on a trip with your Temple family, please do. And I'll say finally, it's been an honor to serve on Temple Israel's Board of Trustees to help ensure that the legacy that we've benefited from endures for future generations. There's so many Jewish concepts and thoughts and teachings that are meaningful and that we study and think about over time. And there are two I'll share with you today that have a lot of meaning for me. But one is, every person is a reflection of the divine. All humanity makes up the whole of God, that we are his partners in creating the world in his image. To me, this is an awesome responsibility and shapes how I look at myself and others and our shared responsibility for making the world a better place. And the other was going back in my conversion notes, and was one that I'd learned about with Rabbi Greenstein, and there's a Rabbi David Polish, is it? Who wrote about the historical concept of mitzvot. And so the concept being, as we perform mitzvot, they're connection points with God. They're also connection points with the history of generations who have performed those same mitzvot. I've evolved as a person on my Jewish journey. My understanding of the world and my place in it continues to deepen. The more I learn and engage, the more my heart and spirit expand. Choosing Judaism continues to be my greatest gift. And as we enter the new year, 5783, I hope that we all renew and deepen our Jewish journeys, that we all continue to learn and engage and grow together, because what we've got is very precious. Thank you.
Before Alex, obviously Baylee, Wendy, and Alex all remind us what grows never grows old. I didn't say because I'm not a Jew because I'm a rabbi. I'm a rabbi because I'm a Jew. And Wendy Rotter will be succeeding Lee as president, as the 54th president of Temple in 2004. So mazel tov on your leadership. I have to tell one mikvah story since she's taken me back. Some of you, who may not have been here in '94, what was that about? So the story is, I require mikvah for anyone to embrace Judaism. The same thing that all rabbis require, right? You study, you have a Beit Din, you have mikvah. But back in '94, and to this day, Orthodox rabbis will not allow conservative or Reform rabbis to use their mikvahs. So you're either Orthodox or not. It doesn't matter whether you're Reform, conservative. So there was a woman who was singing in the choir here who was engaged to a guy from Nashville, getting married by a conservative rabbi, and he was very cool with my standards. But it was February of '94. Do you remember the ice storm? We had an ice storm, and her wedding was going to be in March, so she wanted to do the conversion. I was supposed to take her to the mikveh. There was no Beth Shalom mikveh at the time, so Art and Bert Wolf had what he called a private lake out in Eads. So it says in the book of religious practice used by conservative Orthodox rabbis that if there's no mikveh available, you use a lake. That's how Art offered that to Rabbi Becker of blessed memory from Beth Shalom and me and other rabbis who wanted to. The problem was everything was frozen. But fortunately, in this book it says, if there's no lake available and there's a JCC, you can use the JCC pool. I called this wonderful rabbi 30 years ago, and I tell him what I've read, and he said, Rabbi Greenstein, I'm very sorry to tell you, I was in a minority opinion. I won't accept the pool. I'm like, what do you want me to do? He said, you have to go to the lake. So as with Wendy, you bring a female attendant. It wasn't Sally Rosenberg at the time, as it was Our Lady of the Mikveh now, we call her. So I went out with the female with me because you completely disrobe. And anyway, so we go out there, and I turn around out of sight, and all of a sudden I hear, ah! When she gets her bathrobe on with the female attendant, I said to her, I'll call her Susie, it's not her name. I said, Susie, I am so sorry. This is just to meet the standards of that rabbi in Nashville. She said, Rabbi Greenstein, after what the Jewish people have been through, it's the least I could do. I'm glad you laughed, because the one who we call the chief, the person who makes everyone feel good when you're around him, Alex Saharovich.
Thank you, Rabbi, and thank you for asking me to speak today. First, I want to say, Baylee, I know your mom somewhere in the sky is looking at you and also at your brother Josh and saying how proud they are of you. You both are amazing people. And Wendy, I told you this earlier, you went to Rhodes, which is the jewel of liberal arts schools in the country, and I think that university's got to be so proud of the alumni that you have become, with all the philanthropy and your deep thinking. I was born in Bucharest, Romania in 1960, 15 years after World War II ended. Romania at the time was a communist country, staunchly communist. And I had a great childhood. My father in Romania was a lawyer. He taught at the law school, and he was also vice chairperson of the Romanian Basketball League. My mom was an organic chemist. And my mom, as an organic chemist, had an office 2 doors down from Elena Ceausescu, who was the dictator's wife, Nicolae Ceausescu. We had a front row seat at communism. I also knew that in order to survive economically, socially, you had to be a communist. I remember as a child going to school and being a young pioneer, which is a young communist movement, and I always had to wear blue pants, white shirt, red scarf, and a blue beret. We also marched in front of the communist leadership on May the 1st, which was the Workers' Proletariat Day, or August 23rd, the Romanian Independence Day. In school, I heard many anti-Semitic slurs. The only thing about it is I did not know I was Jewish. My parents did not tell me that I was Jewish until the age of about 9. The reason they protected me is because had I known that I was Jewish, I would have been affected by all the anti-Semitic jokes and anti-Semitic slurs that I heard as a child, not knowing it applied to me. The way I found out about it, my grandparents had come from the small town that they lived in the mountains, and they came to Bucharest, and we had a Passover. And the Passover was a clandestine Passover. All the windows were shut. We had a person at the door to make sure that nobody would be there. And then, more importantly, we had a Seder. I was very confused, but my parents pulled me aside and they told me that, look, you are Jewish, but don't say that to anybody. That's not something you want to go out and say. And I knew that because I had heard so many slurs. Whenever somebody would cheat in a soccer game, they would be called the Yid, Hebreu. The next thing that I recall is I was about 12 years old, and my dad took me down a boulevard. It was a cold night in December, and he told me that our family had received permission to come to America. I started crying because I did not know much about America. I knew America from the fact that I played with cowboys and Indian toys, and also we had two channels in Romania, Channel 1 and Channel 2. And on both of those channels, the only show that I remember, there was an American show with the Untouchables. So my heroes, aside from all the soccer players and the basketball players that my dad introduced me to, were Al Capone and Elliot Ness. So my dad took me down that day and he pulled out a toy out of his pocket, seeing me cry. He says, see, it says Made in USA, made in USA. And with that, I stopped crying and I realized that the next chapter would unfold. My parents immediately lost their jobs. The moment you applied, you lose your jobs. And that was a difficult time. Didn't really understand what was going on. But we got permission to go to Italy, where we, thank God, to Hias and the Joint Distribution Committee. We were able to live there for 6 months, and my parents exposed me to everything that was possible. I think I saw every church and every monument that could have been seen. It was a different kind of education. I found out the way I got to Italy, was the fact that my granduncle, my grandfather's brother, was able to pay Ceausescu. See, the conditions in Romania had become really bad in 1970, 71, at that period of time. So Ceausescu started a program that he was going to sell the Jews. This is well documented, but he started selling the Jews through a source in England named Mr. Jacober. I never found out how much my granduncle, he was a member of this synagogue. His name was Isidore Beck, and his wife was Gertrude Beck, probably for 65 years. He wanted to bring his brother's family to America. So he paid Mr. Jacober. Also, Jews from Romania went to Israel. Israel was paying Ceausescu a lot less sums than American people paid. I still to this day don't know how much he paid, but I'm really grateful for the fact that he did and the freedom that I got. When I got to America, I didn't speak English, and it was difficult. The first couple of years were difficult because one of the experiences, my mom, who thank God is here with me today, took me to MUS to try to get me into MUS, and Mr. Thorne looked at me and we had a conversation. He says, nice man, but he doesn't speak much English. I don't think he'll do well here. So I did not get into MUS. So I had to attend the school in my neighborhood, we lived on Avalon, and I attended Snowden. I was a minority at Snowden at the time, but it was the best thing that happened to me because I think I developed a sense of humor and realized that that's the only way you're going to get by all the things that were going on. My nickname in 8th grade was Shema because we were asked to sing songs, and my parents were sending me to Talmud Torah, and the only song I knew was Shema Israel, and just like Rabbi Dreyfus put his hand on his eyes, I did the same thing. So everybody called me Shema. So for 8th grade, I was Shema down there. The two real events that took place in my life that really and I will get to what got me to the passion and advocacy that I have for Judaism, is the fact that I was speaking at in ninth grade, I was speaking at a group they had back then. There was Russian refuseniks and immigrants were being let out, and we're fighting for Sharansky. So they had asked me as a kid to speak about my experiences, and I did at the JCC. And then I got a call, about 20 or 25 guys came afterwards to me, and they all were so happy and hugging me, and I didn't know what it was about. But what they were saying is, it's AZA intake day. And I didn't know what that was, but my parents were so happy that a Jewish group was coming to me and grabbing me and touching me and wanting me to be a part of them. And that was really my first good experience with Judaism. And they elected me that day, Aleph Gadol of their group. And then I did everything that I could in AZA. It was my life, my passion. And I felt that my chapter was everything that I could enjoy. I then attended, I was lucky. The next big thing that happened to me, my parents befriended Harvey K., who used to be the education director here. They used to call him Harvey K. Super Jew. And Harvey K. arranged for me to have myself and my brother Livio, to have scholarships at Henry S. Jacobs Camp for 3 years. That experience taught me the love of Jewish music, which I have today. And I mean by Jewish music, just any kind of Jewish music warms my heart. And I also enjoyed the fellowship that we had there. The next step in my life, it goes after I go to Northwestern, and that was a great experience for me because I saw the diversity. They had great speakers there, but I didn't do much Jewish at Northwestern. I see Bob Eastman and Bruce Landau, and they could say we had a terrible football team at that time at Northwestern, so there was not much sports, but it was life. I come back to Memphis, and I get a call I start practicing law, and I'm lucky today to have with me my son Ryan, who practices with me, my nephew Stephen, who also practices with me. I was asked to come I get a call from Rachel Shankman. Started practicing law, and Rachel Shankman had been my BBYO director. I always looked up to her. She was a beacon of hope. She always had hope for me. She always related to me. And all those help that she gave me throughout high school in terms of AZA, she called me to sit on her first, might have been her second, I think it was her first, facing history board. And I got involved in it, and quite frankly, I just couldn't speak about the Holocaust. It wasn't my experience. My dad had been in the labor camp. My grandfather had been beaten, the other one killed, but I didn't experience that. It wasn't my life. And nor was I in a position at that time to ask anybody for raise money because I was 30 years old or 29 years old. Well, the next thing that happens after that, before you know it, I'm sitting on 6 boards, and I'm married to the wife, my best friend of 31 years, Deborah, who's always been behind me. And I had 3 kids. Daniel, I thank you for coming from law school today. And Adam, I know he's watching somewhere, and I love my family very much. And I wanted to say that I'm really happy that my mother-in-law Terry's here, and my brother-in-law, who I'm very close, and happy birthday, Ken Steinberg. I didn't see you. And I almost forgot, and I was going to get to Rachel, and I thank you for doing that. Rachel, Ryan's wife, who is so special to our family, and thank you for reminding me, Rabbi. The next thing I want to talk about, we just had a wedding in New Orleans, and my memory's kind of short. But anyway, the next thing that happens, I'm sitting on 6 Jewish boards, and I'm trying to raise a family, and I'm realizing this thing is not going to work out. I mean, I'm passionate about all these institutions, but I just, going to a meeting every night, I just can't do this. So I remained on a couple of them. I stayed on Plow Towers, where I was lucky to have really amazing people. When you talk about Sandy Lewis and Kirk Lewis and Mildred Schwartz, they were mentors of mine, and I sitting there, and I did everything I could through that organization. The other thing is the Solomon Schechter, which allowed me to really, my passion was there because I saw my kids going there to Jewish school, and I thought I could make a difference, and we did. Throughout my life, I also, I left this for the last, I left the Temple Israel involvement for the last, but I wanted to get to it. I had an opportunity for many years to serve on the Temple board and do different things at Temple. But my favorite thing that I did at Temple was when Ben Eisenberg had asked me probably 30 years ago to be a liaison to the Social Action Committee. And I realized, as Micah, who just walked out, is the crown. He's had enough of this speech. That's the crown jewel of the Jewish movement, and I got to see it, and I took my kids to do all those things, and that was so important to me to do that. The next thing that is probably my favorite thing that I ever did at Temple, I was on the executive committee, but what meant the most to me was they didn't have an adult education person here, and they allowed me to be adult education chair, and out of all the things I've ever done, that was the one that I loved because I had got a chance to work with Jan Dreyfus, or Jan Reisman. I call her Dreyfus because Jeffrey just spoke beautifully. But Jan Reisman, who y'all know, Jan Reisman was just superb. She was such a great person to work with. And then also the fact that my dad helped me with those speeches. The other thing I was going to say is that Micah, during that time, that I did adult education, you really, I saw you with 8 books. Jody Franklin had planned a program on, let's see, I forgot what the topic was, but all I know is that you were with 8 books preparing, and you worked so hard, and you do it all the time. I mean, I don't know how you do it, but you did it, and that experience at adult education was a highlight of anything I did. Now, the last thing I'm going to say is this, is that my passion in life really is Eretz Israel, the state of Israel. I've served on the Anti-Defamation League board, and I want to say this. I have had an opportunity to travel, and when we travel to Jewish places. I've been to every place in Europe with the exception of 2 countries. I've visited 10 concentration camps, not because it's something that it's pleasurable, but it's because I have this guilt complex that has been instilled in me, and it's been there from the fact that so many generations behind me, my parents, my grandparents, and all the ones who didn't survive, I wanted to be able to understand it. And I feel in every place that I feel I do understand it. I'm able to now talk to my mom who has shown us, our family is this descendant goes back to Rashi. So all that weighs on me and weighs a lot on me. And it's that passion that drives me. And I think I'm 62 years old, and I hope that God allows me to be involved for the state of Israel. Israel's not perfect. Israel's far from perfect. I mean, the fact that Jewish rabbis, Reform rabbis and conservative rabbis cannot pray there and officiate there is wrong. The fact that women cannot be at the wall is wrong. But at the same time, as Rabbi Dreyfus said the other day, we have to look at it like a Ruth Bader Ginsburg and an Antonin Scalia. We have to be respectful to the other side. We have to try to figure out ways to come together. Ronald Lauder is a great leader of the World Jewish Congress. I was in Bern, Switzerland, 2 months ago when they had the World Jewish Congress. And you realize that Herzl's dream of having a free Israel, having an Israel is so important to all of us. I have personally seen anti-Semitism. I've seen it in many places. I'll finish this with this last story. The worst Anti-Semitic Act that I ever saw, we were in Latvia, and 4 couples were in Riga, and we wanted to go see where 41,000 Jews had been slaughtered in an unmarked grave. So we got 2 cabs, and we asked the cab drivers to take us to where the Jews were slaughtered. And as we were driving there, I get a The cab, I was sitting in front because, of course, my size, I can't sit in the back with the 3 people behind us. So I said to the cab driver, so how is it going here? He says, why do you want to go see the Jews? And I thought to myself, every anger that I had every anger in my body felt like I wanted to go ahead and just say something to him. But I didn't because for 2 reasons. I thought what Elie Wiesel would say, and second of all, I wanted a cab back. I didn't feel like walking 6 miles back. So when we got there, we end there, and we get on the unmarked graves, 41,000, the second largest massacre during the war other than Babi Yar, which the Russians just bombed. So you go down there, and we see the Bronfman Memorial, and one of the people that I was with led us in Kaddish. And that was a great memory to have. So from my part, Israel is so important. Temple, what it does, I mean, you heard Wendy's passion for everything that's done here with Micah and with Jeff. And by the way, that speech today, I haven't heard something like that in a long, long time. May God bless you. So anyway, thank you. Thank you very much.
Adam, Jacob, I know you're watching, but all the family here, I see a mom beaming. The 3 of you are making, and Josh too, probably from Israel. You make your families proud, and I just want to say that. One follow-up on Harvey K. has nothing on Shema the Super Jew. And Alex, I wanted you to be among the first to know, along with over 100 people here, is Rabbi Gary Zola, Dr. Gary Zola, who is the Dean of American Jewish History at the American Jewish Archives, who did a session at yours and Deborah's house, is not making many trips anymore, but he's coming to Memphis on January 13th, the weekend of Martin Luther King weekend, just to come here. He remembers the session with you all, and he's going to be talking about the contribution of the rabbis of this congregation to not just civil rights, but to the best of America, Rabbi Wax, Feinschreiber. So that's going to be the 13th and 14th. I want to say this in a way that I don't see any of you looking at your phones, which is good. There's a rumor going around the Jewish community right now that we've just confirmed is not true. It was announced from a pulpit even, and that is that there are 3 people with AK-47s around Poplar Yates. It's not happening, the Memphis Police Department, but we know how inflamed our phones and rumors become. So if on your phone you hear that, please know that we've confirmed that is not the case. There's an undercurrent here of anti-Semitism. I'm looking at 1:30. There's a very erudite, deep talk that Dr. Jacques Osmo, another person who grew up in Europe, is going to give. If you want to stretch your mind more on that subject, being an American and understanding anti-Semitism from Europe. If you want to stretch your body, go with Jenna, Ruthie, and Marcy for yoga, but we still have time. What time is it? Great. Let's do 5 minutes. If any of you want to ask the panelists anything, would you please? I know that some of us may have met these 3 for the first time. Some of you may have known them all your life, but never known everything you heard just now. Can we have 1 or 2 questions? Please, Ralph.
First of all, I know I can speak for everybody in the room that each of your stories are fascinating and very productive. So thank you on behalf of all of us here. I want to go back.
Yes, and running Rabbi Dreyfus has your microphone, so the thousands of people who will eventually be watching this can hear Ralph Yaffe's question.
So thank you for sharing your stories with us today. My question, I guess, really applies to both Baylee and Wendy. I think it's remarkable that you all had the opportunity to grow up having both Judaism and Christianity in your lives. And Baylee, you had spoke about the hereafter a little bit in terms of Judaism really focuses on the here and now as opposed to what happens after we're gone. I guess my question to both of you is, in Christianity, there is a more of a defined term when we leave this earth, and most of their lives are spent doing as good as they can here to get to the other side. Judaism, not so much, at least in my perception. So how did you process the differences in those two ideologies when you made your decision to come to Judaism?
That's a good question, and it's one I didn't really even think about much, other than it made such perfect sense for me as someone considering embracing Judaism, someone who is a Jew now, and that is I can control what I do now. I want to live my best life and have the best impact on my fellow man and this planet now versus, who knows what happens after we're gone, honestly, but I definitely was drawn to my work here right now.
So that was one of the major questions I had when I was, wrestling with Christianity and Judaism. And it's actually funny that you asked that, because when I was working at Temple, I had a few different students of religious studies reach out to me and asked if they could meet with me to learn more about Judaism. They had a project about, learning about other religions. And all of the questions that they asked me were very centered around Christian ideology. And when I was giving the answers, it was very funny because they were just always so shocked because their questions were like, what comes after this world? Or, what is like the end of days look like? And those were all of the questions. And I kept saying, we don't have an answer to that. And they were just so surprised and shocked. But for me, that was definitely one of the pulls to Judaism. I vividly remember a Sunday school class with Rabbi Greenstein, actually, and we were talking about the afterlife and what was going to happen. And, he told me that Judaism believes that if you live a good life and you, dedicate yourself to making this world better, then you get into our version of whatever paradise is. And that felt really right to me. That felt very true to me, regardless of background or identity. And a lot of other religions don't see that. So, I would say that was definitely one of my pulls towards Judaism. So I hope I answered your question.
You answered beautifully. I just want to be clear, since this is being recorded. A lot of us were not taught growing up about Judaism's embrace of the afterlife. We just, as Baylee said so elegantly, we just don't know what it's going to be like. But when we say, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Bimromav is heaven. When God who makes peace in heaven, that's a Jewish concept. So while there are differences between Judaism, Christianity, and the other faiths, the main difference is the definition of sin, as I talked about last night. That in Judaism, that's why we're here today. We're trying to correct our ways. Sin is something you do. It's not something you are. That's where Christianity left Judaism in its definition of sin. But when it comes to the afterlife, you know that March song, Adon Olam Asher Ma, right? You know what it means? So we don't. It means when I go to sleep and when I wake, and if I don't wake, Biyado Afkid Ruchi, I'm safe with you wherever we go from here. So the idea is that when we die, the person who dies is fine. We're not. That's the problem, is those left behind. But Judaism has so much faith that God will take care of us after we leave this world. Emphasize this world. Don't worry about that. And so that's why religion's based in fear. And by the way, not all Christians believe what all Christians believe necessarily. There's a whole spectrum on that, of course. But please know that Judaism believes this is a rehearsal for death, Yom Kippur, but we all believe, according to the rabbis, in fact, do you know resurrection is a deeply Jewish? I nixed a song at one of the later music hours because it's perceived to be a Christian song, even though it's not. Do you know Josh Groban? His dad's Jewish, his mother isn't. He wrote a song called You Raise Me Up, that happy, and the reason we're not doing it, it's not a Christian song, by the way. He wrote it for his mother's, but it connotes this idea of resurrection, which is a deeply Jewish idea. Jews always believed in resurrection, but what we didn't believe in was that the world has been redeemed and that the Messiah has come, because there's still war and sadness and plague and so forth. But please know that however you emphasize your Judaism, what's the word for a good deed in Judaism? What's the word for faith in Judaism? See? It just bears out what Baylee and Alex and Wendy's lives have been about, Jewishly, and probably yours. You are what you do, not what you profess to believe. The Hebrew word for faith is emunah, which is the word amen, which comes from the word for mom, aleph mem. So what is it, 123? So a famous story of the Pope when he redid the Vatican. He was shown the plans, and he wrote 3 words on it. Non sumus angeli. We are not angels. The architect didn't understand. He said, why did you write that? And the Pope said, because you forgot the bathrooms. So we're going to take a little break right now. And at 1:30 in this room, Dr. Jacques Osmo, and in the Danziger Chapel, join Jenna, Ruthie, Marcy for yoga. But most importantly, please thank these 3.